program specialist in the EPA's Resource Management Division.
And you have a PhD in climate science from Stanford.
Yes, and another in chemistry with a master's in biology.
Okay. Tell us about the findings in the report that was just released.
The latest measurements taken at Mauna Loa in Hawaii indicate a CO2 level of 400 parts per million.
Just so we know what we're talking about, if you were a doctor and we were the patient, what's your prognosis? 1,000 years, 2,000 years?
A person has already been born who will die due to catastrophic failure of the planet.
Okay, can you expand on that?
Sure. It's as if you're sitting in your car, in your garage, with the engine running and the door closed, and you've slipped into unconsciousness, and that's it.
What if someone comes and opens the door?
You're already dead.
What if the person got there in time?
You'd be saved.
Okay. So now what's the CO2 equivalent of the getting there on time?
Shutting off the car 20 years ago.
The heat wave felt around the world continued this week. In Phoenix, Arizona, temperatures have surpassed 110 degrees for 22 consecutive days. Throughout the state, emergency room visits are up. People are suffering not only from heat exhaustion, but from second and third degree burns because pavements and metal surfaces are reaching temperatures of higher than 180 degrees. You burn yourself just for touching a building or touching something that's metal.
Work through this tragedy. The way I would describe it, and I'm going to amend something I said before, this is not the new normal, this is the new abnormal. And this new abnormal will continue, certainly in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years.
So steeply since the 1980s that Arctic sea ice is now melting twice as fast as it once did. 370,000 people were killed by extreme weather, with many of the casualties blamed on paralyzing heat waves that gripped Europe in 2003 and Russia in 2010. The report said the last decade was the warmest since the 1850s. Almost half the nations on Earth broke 50-year-old records for high temperatures.
July to the end of August, over 15,000 people were killed in France by heat exhaustion, dehydration, and heat stroke. Most of the dead were elderly. On one day alone, a day that's now known as Black Monday, 3,000 Parisians died.
Never during the Second World War did so many people die in one night in Paris, even during the bombings. We were dealing with things on such a scale.
Thank you. Last month, right here in this place, I announced that the first 6 months of the year, January through June, each set new records for high global temperatures. That means in the 118 years since we began keeping modern, reliable records, last January was the warmest January. Last February was the warmest February. Last March was the warmest March in history. Last April was the hottest April. Last May was the hottest May. And last
Proponents of the global warming theory say that higher levels of greenhouse gases, especially CO2, are causing world temperatures to rise and that burning fossil fuels is the reason. But scientific evidence remains inconclusive as to whether human activities affect the global climate. Everyone agrees that burning fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide and that such concentrations in the atmosphere are rising. But it's a long and dangerous leap to conclude that we should therefore cut fossil fuel use.
Of billions more mouths to feed? What is now considered abnormal weather could become a new norm. Faced with such a disturbing scenario, governments are having to consider their response. Global warming is not yet certain, but many think that to wait for final proof would be irresponsible. Action now is seen as the only safe insurance. But what should that action be?
But to stop the easy flow of energy is difficult. We all enjoy it far too much. Energy on tap from the central electricity generating board. A small part of a technology built on the assumption of limitless supplies of fuel. Into our relatively prosperous world. It is our wealth that manufactures CO2. But having created the problem, can we reasonably ask poor countries which have never enjoyed all this to exercise restraint?
Do we have a right to play around with global systems in that way? I mean, is the world ours to play with, to experiment with? I think not. I mean, I think we owe future generations, other life on the planet, a profound duty of restraint. And right now, we don't seem to be exercising it.
We are part of this planet. It sustains us. We must sustain it. Yet we're mortgaging.